The image of a land where every street, every wall, every grain of sand carries the weight of 1,000 years of history? A place where two peoples, both claiming the same home, have been locked in a conflict so deep it shaped the modern world itself. This is the story of Israel and Palestine, a war fought with bullets, faith, and memories. And the scariest part is, it's not just a fight over land, it's a fight over truth. Hey everyone, I'm Top, and this is Toppy Top History. Today we're diving into one of the most complex, emotional, and misunderstood conflicts in human history, the struggle between Israel and Palestine. This isn't about taking sides. It's about understanding how something that started as a political disagreement turned into a generational tragedy. So grab your seat, because this story goes way deeper than headlines. To understand how it all started, we have to go back, not decades, but centuries. Long before modern borders, this land was known as Canaan, the Holy Land, home to Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike. For thousands of years, empires rose and fell here. Egyptians, Babylonians, Romans, Ottomans. Each one left its mark, and each claimed the land as their own. But everything changed in the early 20th century. The Ottoman Empire collapsed after World War I, and Britain took control under something called the British Mandate for Palestine. And this, right here, is where the modern story begins. During the war, Britain made two conflicting promises. To the Jews, they supported the idea of creating a homeland, the Balfour Declaration of 1917. To the Arabs, they promised independence if they helped fight the Ottomans. You don't have to be a historian to see what happens next. Two peoples, two promises, one land. It was a time bomb ticking under the Middle East. As Jewish immigration grew in the 1920s and 30s, fueled by persecution in Europe, tensions exploded. Palestinian Arabs saw their land disappearing. Jewish settlers, survivors of pogroms and later the Holocaust, saw this as their only hope. For one side, it was a dream of return. For the other, it was the fear of being erased. In 1947, the newly formed United Nations decided to split the territory, one part for Jews, one part for Arabs. Jerusalem would be international, belonging to no one. The Jewish leadership accepted, the Arab leadership rejected. And in 1948, when Israel declared independence, 5 Arab nations invaded overnight. It wasn't just war, it was the beginning of everything that followed. Over 700,000 Palestinians were displaced, what they called the Nakba, the catastrophe. And for Israelis, it became the miracle of survival, the birth of their state against all odds. From that moment on, every bullet, every wall, every peace talk has carried the shadow of that first divide. The creation of Israel in 1948 was more than just the birth of a nation. It was the spark that ignited generations of conflict. The lines had been drawn. For Israelis, independence meant survival. For Palestinians, it meant exile. And the world watched as a small corner of land became the center of global tension. In the decades that followed, Israel fought war after war. In 1956, in 1967, and again in 1973. Each conflict redrawing borders, reshaping lives, and deepening the divide. The most famous of them all, the Six-Day War in 1967. Israel launched a preemptive strike and in less than a week captured territories 4 times its original size: the Sinai Peninsula, the Golan Heights, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem. It was one of the most stunning military victories in modern history. But every victory carried a curse, because with every new piece of land came millions of Palestinians now living under Israeli control. What was seen as a miracle for one nation became an occupation for another. Nowhere is the conflict more visible than in Jerusalem, a city sacred to Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike. For Israel, it's their eternal capital. For Palestinians, it's the heart of their future state. The city's skyline, golden domes, ancient walls, and checkpoints tells the story better than any textbook. It's not just about who owns the city, it's about who belongs there. By the late 1980s, the pressure exploded. Palestinian frustration turned into a movement known as the Intifada, meaning uprising. Stones against rifles, teenagers against tanks. And soon, a new generation grew up knowing nothing but resistance. For many in the West, the word terrorism became tied to Palestine. For Palestinians, it was resistance against occupation. Two words, two realities, one endless tragedy. And yet, in the 1990s, something unexpected happened. Under the hot Oslo sun, leaders from both sides shook hands. Yitzhak Rabin and Yaroslav Arafat, two men from opposite worlds, stood together and promised peace. The world believed change was coming. The Oslo Accords gave Palestinians limited self-rule and the hope of statehood. For a moment, it felt like the nightmare might end. But that moment didn't last. Extremists on both sides saw peace as betrayal. Rabin was assassinated by an Israeli nationalist, and with him, much of the hope died too. The 2000s brought more violence, more walls, and deeper division. Israel built a massive security barrier, some call it a wall, others a fence, to stop attacks. It did reduce violence, but it also separated families, farmlands, and entire communities. And on the other side, groups like Hamas gained power in Gaza, launching rockets and vowing to destroy Israel. The dream of peace turned back into survival for both sides. Today, the wall still stands. So do the checkpoints, the air raids, and the fear. But behind all of that, there are still ordinary people, families, children, dreamers, who just want a normal life.
The new century arrived with promises of peace and progress. But for Israel and Palestine, the 2000s didn't bring solutions. They brought more walls, more fear, and a new kind of war. Not just a war fought with rockets and soldiers, but one fought with cameras, hashtags, and headlines. The conflict had gone global. At the center of it all, Gaza, a tiny strip of land just 40 kilometers long. Home to over 2 million people, surrounded by fences and sea, cut off from the outside world. After Israel withdrew in 2005, the militant group Hamas took control. Since then, Gaza has become a battlefield. Thousands of rockets fired toward Israeli cities and devastating airstrikes in return. Each side calls it defense, each side calls the other terrorists. And civilians, always, are the ones who pay the price. For Palestinians in Gaza, daily life is a test of endurance. Electricity for only a few hours a day, limited access to clean water, jobs nearly impossible to find. For Israelis living near the border, life is a cycle of alarms and shelters. Children learn to count seconds between the warning siren and the explosion. Both sides live with fear, one from the sky, one from the ground. But the war isn't just physical anymore, it's digital. Every explosion, every raid, every crying child is now broadcast in real time. The internet turned this local conflict into a global argument. On social media, millions pick sides, often without understanding the full story. Posts replace facts, memes replace empathy, and truth becomes just another casualty. International efforts come and go. Ceasefires signed and broken, peace talks announced and forgotten. Each time, hope rises, and each time it collapses under the weight of mistrust. In Israel, governments change, coalitions fall, and politics shift further towards security over compromise. In Palestine, leadership remains divided. The West Bank under the Palestinian Authority, Gaza under Hamas. One people, two governments, no unity. Peace is no longer just difficult. It feels impossible. Yet even here, amid rubble and checkpoints, life continues. Couples get married under air raid sirens, kids play soccer next to bomb shelters, markets reopen hours after airstrikes.
The resilience of both peoples is something the world rarely sees, a quiet defiance against despair. For many, survival itself has become a form of protest. Every few years, the headlines return. Another war, another ceasefire, another count of the dead. But between those moments of violence, there's a silence filled with waiting, anger, and exhaustion. And in that silence, the same question echoes across generations. If peace is impossible here, what hope does the rest of the world have? Every generation in Israel and Palestine has grown up knowing only one thing: conflict. Fathers who fought wars, sons who grow up under air raid sirens, children who can name the sound of a drone before they learn their alphabet. It's not just history repeating itself, it's trauma passed down like an inheritance. In Israel, fear became part of national identity. After centuries of persecution and the Holocaust, survival isn't just a goal, it's the foundation of the state itself. For many Israelis, every threat feels like history returning. Every rocket, every knife attack, every hostile neighbor, it all echoes the same ancient fear: extinction. And when fear builds a nation, it builds walls, both physical and invisible. Across the wall in Gaza and the West Bank, that same fear turns into rage. Decades of occupation, checkpoints, humiliation, and the world that seems to watch but never act. For many Palestinians, resistance isn't a choice, it's identity, a way to exist in a world that keeps shrinking around them. When you take away hope, anger becomes the only language left. This is where the real tragedy lies, not in politics or borders, but in the eyes of the young. A boy in Gaza grows up believing every drone in the sky wants him dead. A girl in Tel Aviv learns to run for cover at the sound of a siren. Two children, same fear, different flags. They've never met, but they already see each other as enemies, because the war isn't just fought over land, it's fought over stories. Those who speak for peace are often the first to be silenced. Journalists arrested, activists labeled as traitors, families divided not by religion, but by opinion. Because after decades of violence, even hope itself becomes suspicious. Every call for peace sounds like surrender to someone. And so, silence wins again. In the end, it's not about politics, it's about people. The mother who buries her son after a bombing, the soldier who can't sleep because of what he saw, the child who draws tanks instead of trees. Numbers become statistics, names become news headlines, and the world scrolls past until the next explosion brings it all back. Both sides believe they are victims. Both sides believe they are right. And maybe that's why no one wins. Because when two nations carry generations of pain, peace isn't just a treaty, it's forgiveness. And forgiveness is the hardest thing to find in a land where every story ends in loss. Maybe the hardest truth is this: Israel and Palestine aren't just two nations at war. They're a mirror of humanity itself. Fear and pride, faith and power, victims who became defenders, and defenders who became oppressors. It's a cycle older than the borders on any map. Every country has an opinion. Every person has a side. But how many truly understand the people living inside this story? Can we really call it a conflict when one side lives behind walls and the other under rockets? When does defense become aggression? When does survival become domination? And when both sides are bleeding, who's the enemy anymore? They say religion started here. So how did the land of prophets become a land of soldiers? How did faith, once meant to unite, turn into a reason to divide? And why do politics always claim to seek peace, while peace itself keeps getting buried under the next election, the next airstrike, the next wall? The truth is heavy. Every nation, every journalist, every historian carries their version of it. But in the end, truth doesn't win wars. It only buries the dead more accurately. Maybe peace doesn't begin with borders or treaties. Maybe it begins the moment someone chooses to listen without waiting to reply. So let me ask you this. If you were born in Gaza, would you still believe in peace? If you grew up in Tel Aviv, would you ever trust your neighbor? If your child's safety depended on a wall, would you tear it down or build it higher? And here's the hardest question of all. After everything that's happened, do you think peace is still possible? Tell me what you think in the comments below, because this isn't just a story about two nations, it's a story about all of us. I'm Top, and this was Toppy Top History. If this story made you think, share it, because maybe the first step to peace is simply to start the conversation.